Warning: the following presentation is intended for mature audiences and it contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes, adult dialogue, and strong language. This podcast represents the opinions of the hosts and their guests, and every effort is made to ensure that information is accurate. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, fellow armchair detectives. I'm your host, Ashleigh.
And I'm your host, Tamlyn Rossouw.
And this is Just in Crime. Join us as we explore the issue of gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa
by exploring the victims and their stories.
Leigh Matthews was a student at Bonds University who was kidnapped, shot, and dumped naked in a vault. Her disappearance and murder sparked a media frenzy, with the following investigation and court case being one of the most closely followed in South African history. This is part 2 of the case of Leigh Matthews. Okay, so let's do a quick recap for all the kids in the back so that we are all caught up and on the same page. Leigh Matthews was a student who was abducted from her university campus. She was supposed to meet her mother at the university to return her credit card after her lecture that took place at 10 that morning. When Leigh didn't meet her mother got very worried since Leigh also wasn't answering her phone, which was very out of character. When her mother, Sharon, finally got a call from Leigh, it wasn't Leigh's voice on the other side. It was her abductor. Later on, he demanded 300,000 rand in cash and said to not get the police involved, otherwise he'd kill Leigh. Rob, Leigh's father, drove to several Standard Bank ATMs to withdraw the money, and while he was driving, he contacted a private investigation company called Revert Risk Management. He arranged to meet one of the private investigators, and he strongly suggested getting the police involved. The police advised Rob to say that he could only get his hands on 50,000 rand. The abductor reluctantly agreed and gave a location to drop the money off. It was time for Rob to do the money drop. He followed the abductor's instructions. He put the money in an unmarked envelope. He drove to the Grasmere Toll Plaza, which is south of the city. When he arrived, he flashed his headlights 3 times and the money was collected. There was no further contact with the abductor from here on out. Leigh's naked body was found in a veld, and after meticulous investigation work, there were still no breaks in the case. It was Donovan Moodley. Cell phone movements and credit card statements were analysed, and they knew they had their man. Bailiffelt and his team wasted no more time and moved in for the arrest. They staked out the house from 4 that morning until Moodley left the house at 9. On the morning of the 4th of October 2004, Donovan Moodley was arrested outside his parents' home in Brackenhurst, Alberton. As he was handcuffed, he said, "What took you so long? I was expecting you."
Excuse you. First of all, why so snarky? Like, your attitude is really not going to help. In this case, like, you're literally getting arrested. And secondly, I feel like he knew he was going to jail. Like, maybe he was saying that so that it could be like a famous thing, like something he'd get attention for the case. IDK, but that's just really rude.
Yeah, I don't know what he was thinking, honestly, but the arresting team of officers took Moodley back into his home, where his parents, Stephen and Mary, were obviously getting ready for their day. They were shocked and confused to see him in handcuffs and demanded to know what was going on. Donovan Moodley dropped to his knees as if in prayer and said, "I committed a murder. I killed Leigh Matthews." His parents were mortified. His mom cried, "I've prayed every night for the Matthews family. Why?" Her son looked at the floor. He had no answer. Investigators found Leigh's tanzanite ring in Moodley's bedroom, hidden inside a CD case, a sick trophy. They also found a disc with letters saved on it addressed to his parents and fiancé, saying that he was sorry and that he knew he was going to prison for at least 30 years. Moodley would later claim that he saw in newspapers that Bielefeld had been assigned to the case, and he knew that he didn't have much time. As soon as his first session of questioning began at the police station, Moodley said that he would tell police everything. Moodley confessed to Bielefeld almost immediately and gave his version of events. He talked them through the kidnapping and the murder. However, his version of events was riddled with inconsistencies. Either way, this is what he told investigators. He admitted that the idea of kidnapping was in his mind because he was desperate for money, and he thought that the easiest way of executing his plan was to take a fellow student and ask her family for money. In the days leading up to Leigh's abduction, Moodley told his parents that he was going on a short trip with a motorbiking friend and that he would return in a couple of days. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, judging by his packing list. He took a balaclava, duct tape, a blanket, as well as his fully loaded 9mm pistol with him. On Tuesday, the 6th of July, he checked into the Formula One hotel that was in Sandton. From there, he took a 10-minute drive to the Bond University campus the next morning. He had not picked his victim yet, but he knew it would be someone from college, as he felt the majority of his classmates came from wealthy families. Ironically though, although Leigh's family lived comfortably, they were not wealthy, and in fact, they were not necessarily much higher up on the socioeconomic ladder than his family. So, yeah.
That is so unfortunate. For him, out of the hundreds of people at the university, you literally pick the one wrong person. It's kind of like if they had to kidnap me or you. We're not particularly wealthy people. You'd be very disappointed.
We'd be searching for the money with you, bro.
Yeah, exactly.
So Donovan Moodley divided his time and went to Bond University campus on the 7th, 8th, and 9th of July, prowling the parking lot, looking for his victim. On Friday morning, the 9th, he saw Leigh on her way to her white Toyota Taz. He asked her for a lift to a nearby intersection. She agreed. In South Africa, hijackings occur quite often, so Leigh was super conscious when it came to security and stuff. She would habitually remind her friends and her family to lock up behind them and lock the doors of their cars while they were driving. But Moodley was well-dressed, eloquent and unthreatening. To Leigh, he was a fellow student who needed a quick ride, and she was on her way anyway. For Leigh to have agreed to give Moodley a lift, she must have believed that he was harmless. With her guard down, she drove off and made small talk with him. According to Moodley, as soon as they approached the intersection where she was supposed to drop him off, he pulled out his firearm and pointed it at her head. He forced her into the back seat, and he shifted into the driver's seat. He found an isolated park where he let her out of the vehicle. He bound her wrists and gagged her, then ushered her into the trunk of her own car. He drove back to the university parking lot, where he parked next to his own car. He waited until the coast was clear, then he transferred his victim into the trunk. He drove to Walkerville, where he parked in a field and waited. Moodley only used Leigh's phone to communicate with her parents. On the night of the money exchange, Leigh was still in the trunk of his car, only a few meters away from where her dad was parked. Once Moodley had the money, he wasn't sure what to do next. He drove around for a while, looking for the best place to leave her. He knew that Leigh would be able to recognize him, knowing that he went to the same university as her. He realized that he would probably not get away with it, and he would have to kill her. And that is why he drove back to the location in Walkerville, where they waited all day, as he knew it was an isolated place and there would not be any eyewitnesses. He opened the trunk and let her out at gunpoint. Then he ordered her to undress because he wanted to burn her clothes to destroy all evidence. He gave her a blanket for modesty, and as she turned her back on him, he shot her in the back of the head. After that, he dragged her body deeper into the field and shot her 3 more times to make sure that she was no longer alive. Then he went to an open lot in Lenasia, close to his parents' home, where he burnt Leigh's clothes and belongings as well as his own. He heard about her tanzanite ring on the news, so he went back to the burnt evidence and retrieved the ring late one night. After he took Leigh, he killed her and discarded her body. Moodley went on with his regular routine, like nothing was wrong. The very night after he killed her, he went to a casino with his friends. Moodley also went on a spending spree and bought what he referred to as odds and ends, explaining the 1,200 rand investigators couldn't trace. He bought an engagement ring with the ransom money he had taken from Rob Matthews and arranged a trip to Durban with Yashika and her sister, as well as her sister's husband. While in Durban, they went on a romantic sunset cruise and he proposed. Yashika said yes. Needless to say, the engagement didn't last. Moodley broke it off, and after his arrest, knowing he would be going to prison for a long time, he faced a mountain of irrefutable evidence. This was his story to the police. Like I said earlier, there are many, many inconsistencies. Forensic technicians retrieved 2 of Leigh's blonde hairs on the back seat of Moodley's car. Ballistic experts were able to confirm that Moodley's Taurus 9mm pistol was the gun used to kill Leigh Matthews. But his story about shooting her when she turned her back on him didn't add up. Looking at the trajectory of the gunshots, Leigh must have been in a seated position when she was shot. He stood above her and fired downwards, point blank. After she was dead, another 2 shots were fired into her chest. Moodley then carried the cartridges and kept them so that he could pose the scene when he dumped her 12 days later. There was also a gash on Leigh's head where it looked like she had struggled against a knife attack. Moodley claimed to have no idea about this injury, though. At the location where he had burnt his and Leigh's clothing, police found the remnants of Leigh's cell phone, her burnt ID, the underwire of a bra, part of a wristwatch, as well as keys that proved to be Leigh's car keys.
Before we jump into the investigation, be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Just in Crime SA for more episodes, case-related content, updates, and other riveting content.
Also, always keep in mind that we are not professionals in any of these discussed fields. If you or anyone you know is in danger, you can find resources on our social media pages, or alternatively, you can contact the Gender-Based Violence Command Center at 0800 428 428 or SMS HELP to 31531. In court, forensic experts testified that the shell casings found at the scene where Leigh's body was found did not match the position of her body. The type of weapon used would not have caused the cartridges to have landed next to Leigh's feet when she was shot in the head and torso. 2 bullets went straight through her body, yet, despite extensive searches with metal detectors and ground-penetrating radar, the bullets were never found. When Leigh's body was found, the lack of insect activity became vital evidence in the case. Decomposition was slowed down by storing her deceased body in a cool place, like a fridge or like a freezer. There were no flies or ants on her body. In an experiment conducted 1 year after Leigh was abducted, entomologists proved that flies and ants would have been present at the scene and would definitely have gone onto a decaying body. Yet, there were absolutely no insects on Leigh. This is none except for a grass funnel web spider. What was significant about this find was that this kind of spider typically weaves a web and comes out to catch its prey once the web is compromised. Yet, the spider on Leigh's body had virtually no webs. It proved that the spider was only on her body for a very short amount of time, not 10 days as Moodley had suggested. The case was strong, but something still didn't add up. Why did the man who found her body, Elliot Matkobela, not see her body the day before? Where did Moodley keep her? Where did he shoot her? He was never able to provide an answer to this question. On the 25th of July 2005, Donovan Moodley pleaded guilty on 3 charges against him: murder, kidnapping, and extortion. At his trial, Leigh's family and friends showed up in the masses, everyone wearing white ribbons in memory of Leigh. Moodley had his fair share of supporters too, with everyone behind him wearing blue ribbons. Dude, imagine supporting someone who openly admitted to kidnapping someone, extorting a family and murdering someone.
Dude, that is so wild to me because literally by supporting him, you're indirectly saying I'm supporting all the actions that he did. And also, couldn't they get creative? If Leigh's family is doing white ribbons, why must they also now go and do blue ribbons? Wear a hat, wear something else, get creative. But literally, that's so crazy to me. How could you do that?
Yeah, I just, I don't understand a lot about this case, but it's fine. We'll learn more as we go along. So, the Reverend Stephen Moodley spoke on his son's behalf. He said that Donovan's family stood by him, but as a father, he felt responsible for his son's deeds and his family was ashamed to be associated with a crime of this nature. Stephen said that his son Donovan did not deserve forgiveness from the Matthews family. Rob Matthews expressed how his family's lives had been completely torn apart. He stated that it was still difficult for them to accept that they would never see their daughter again, and when he saw a girl that looked similar to Leigh, his heart would jump for a second, thinking that just perhaps it could have all been a horrible mistake. When he left the witness stand, he shook hands with Donovan Moodley's father. Sharon Matthews would later say that they felt bad for Donovan's parents as they also lost a child. Prosecutor Zoe van Zyl recited a quote from D.H. Lawrence in court. "The dead don't die, they look on for help." He said that the injuries on Leigh's body told law enforcement that there was more to this case, something else that Moodley wasn't telling them. Despite the prosecutor's pleas for Moodley to come clean, he gave no additional information. Experts testified to prove that he was lying and that there was a considerable possibility that at least 5 people could have been involved in the abduction and Moodley was just protecting them. One inconsistency that troubled investigators was Moodley's version that he only pulled out his firearm once he and Leigh had left Bond University campus. The story that Leigh agreed to give Moodley a lift came from Moodley's confession alone. Leigh knew her mother was coming soon, and she would not have driven off without seeing her mom to hand over her credit card. Chances are that she agreed to give Moodley a lift. Then, as soon as they were in the car, she said that she just needed to give something to her mom. Realizing that his plan could fall apart, he acted immediately, pointed his gun at her early on in the abduction, essentially hijacking her and forcing her to drive to the park where he bound, gagged, and blindfolded her. Then he drove to the campus where he placed her body in the trunk of his own car. It's a chilling thought that Sharon must have missed her distressed daughter by only a minute or 2. Donovan Moodley was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for murder, 15 years for kidnapping, and 10 years for extortion. So altogether, Donovan Moodley was sentenced to 40 years in prison. He will be released at the age of 65. The Matthews family were happy with the sentence. His kidnapping and extortion sentence would also run concurrently.
This is so disappointing. As we've mentioned in several other episodes, concurrently means that they run at the same time. So he's only going to end up spending 15 years in prison for his last 2 sentences and not 25, which again is just so disappointing.
It is very disappointing, but when Judge Joop Labuschagne read the verdict, he stated, for the record, that he believed that Moodley did not act alone. Moodley could never explain what he did with Leigh during the time from when she last spoke to her dad to when she was discovered. Leigh's family felt that justice was served and that the right person, or at least one of the right ones, was behind bars. You'd think that this ordeal was finally over. Well, wrong.
Is that a buzzer noise?
Yes, that is a buzzer noise, my dear friend, my dear host. So, even though the case only lasted 2 days before sentencing, Moodley made a mockery out of the judiciary system and the victim's family. Here's why. 2 weeks after his sentencing in August 2005, Moodley filed an appeal, claiming that he did not kill Leigh after all and that he was framed. On the 18th of November 2005, he, however, withdrew this appeal. The following year, which was 2006, he made another claim, saying that he didn't act alone and that he was framed. His sentence was upheld by the Supreme Court of Appeal. On the 25th of November 2009, another application filed in the Johannesburg High Court for leave to appeal his sentence was dismissed by Judge Joop Labuschagne. In 2010, his application for an appeal to the Constitutional Court was denied and his original sentence was upheld. In 2011, when Piet Beileveld's book, Beileveld, Dossier of a Serial Sleuth, was published, it revealed for the first time that there was evidence pointing to the fact that Leigh had not been the first person that Moodley kidnapped. Plot twist. When Beileveld had looked at Moodley's financial records, he saw a deposit of 92,000 Rand in January of 2004. Moodley claimed that this came from his pool table rental business, but the numbers didn't add up, obviously. Beileveld's...
Who gets 92,000 Rand from a pool table?
From 2 coin-operated pool tables. I don't know, apparently Moodley. But in any case, Bielefeld agrees with us. He believes strongly that he was so organized and professional because he had kidnapped others, gotten paid the ransoms, and then released the people. And those people most likely just ended up like living their lives, being grateful, like not willing to tempt fate by like contacting the police. So yeah, in 2012, Moodley requested a retrial. At the hearing, he chose to act in his own defense. His reasoning was thorough, and he had clearly used his time behind bars to build his case. In fact, he studied law and became a qualified lawyer. He tried his best to poke holes in Bielefeld's investigation, poring over the smallest details. However, he was not successful.
Well, like, duh, how are you a criminal but you care about the law? That literally makes no sense. You can't be a criminal. Like, I mean, you can. Obviously, people change. But, like, that doesn't make sense. You don't respect the law, but you want to study it.
Yeah, dude. And also he's out here trying to get like past Wim Piet Bielefeld. I'm like, it's Wim Piet.
Yeah, dude. Like your years of studying, not even practicing, just studying law is not going to like match up to Wim Piet's years and years and years of experience.
Exactly. But anyway, his request was denied, which meant that he had exhausted all of his appeals. Moodley would have to serve his entire 25-year life sentence. No accomplices were ever confirmed in the kidnapping of Leigh Matthews, but there's no way that Donovan Moodley committed this crime on his own. Moodley claimed that he only killed Leigh because of the intense media pressure and the fact that he realized that she could identify him. And with each appeal, the Matthews family did whatever they could to oppose it. Leigh's mother stated that she doesn't think Moodley has shown or felt any remorse. His effort to appeal, it's to help himself, not to make amends or to do the right thing and reveal the whole story. Prosecutor Zoe van Zyl is convinced that Moodley will still come forward with the entire truth someday, not because it's the right thing to do, but because he's a self-serving narcissist who yearns for the limelight.
Oh my gosh, I honestly wish I had like the qualifications and like credentials to just insult someone like that. That is brilliant, and you are 100% right.
Superintendent Piet Bielefeld retired in August 2010, but the investigation remains open to this day. Bielefeld claimed that he knows who assisted Moodley. He has names, but there was not enough evidence to charge them. It haunts me, he admitted. Honestly, all I want for Wim Piet Bielefeld to name and shame. Like, honestly, I don't think there's any way he did this on his own. Like, Ash, what do you think?
I'm for that. Name and shame. Put it on Facebook. Tag the people. Like, I'm sorry, there were too many phone calls. Her body was so clean, like, and then there was a whole mortuary thing, and they could pin like this. I don't know. There's just too much. They're very, very clearly more than just him involved.
Yeah, dude, we're definitely on the same page. And even when Bielefeld agreed, and this is what he said, he believed that Leigh's kidnapping was a planned abduction and that no less than 5 people were involved. In his biography, Bielefeld, Dossier of a Serial Sleuth, the retired detective names one of Moodley's friends, Coogan Reddy. According to Bielefeld, there were multiple phone calls between Moodley and Reddy on the day of Leigh's abduction. Reddy also made a call from the highway near the Grasmere Toll Plaza at the exact time when Rob Matthews made the money drop. What a coincidence. Bielefeld also found it interesting that at 2 that evening on the day he kidnapped Leigh, Moodley called his girlfriend Yashika. She left work and her phone pinged at Lenasia South, near Walkerville. Remember, Moodley's phone was used in Lenasia that afternoon? Moodley was also in contact with his business partner as well as Yashika's sister's boyfriend. Also, I don't think you're ready for this.
I'm probably not, but go anyway.
The forensic team also learned that Moodley was fired from his job as a financial manager because Mans was suspected of fraud.
You see, for every rat you see, there's 50 you don't. Mans was doing the wrong thing from the beginning. How's that law degree treating you, my man? How's it treating you? Fraud, murder, extortion, you just have all of them. Give up.
There wasn't enough evidence to charge him, so if he was guilty, he managed to get away with it. The plot thickens. Bielefeld also said that Moodley had a friend who owned a mortuary 15 kilometers from the location where Leigh's body was found. When police started investigating that line of inquiry, the mortuary closed down and no evidence linking Leigh to the mortuary was ever found. Bielefeld also makes a shocking revelation. In going through phone records, he was able to establish that 3 months before the abduction, Moodley had called Leigh on her cell phone. They had a conversation for a couple minutes and then they hung up. She knew him all along, which made her so much more vulnerable to the predator that took her. Bielefeld said that while he hoped the first gunshot had ended Leigh's life and prevented further suffering, the autopsy could not confirm. He said that although he had kept in contact with the Matthews family since her death, experience had taught him to discard the memory of evil. He said, "While I'm working to catch a killer, the case occupies me every minute I'm awake. When justice has been done, I put the criminal and his deeds out of my mind. Leigh's father and mother, Sharon, don't have that option. They lost a child in the most terrible circumstances and now have to deal with Moodley making a mockery of the judiciary. It makes their wounds bleed all over again." Bielefeld said Moodley was the worst kind of criminal. "I have dealt with many of his kind and I know he is without conscience. I am not a medical professional, but I would characterize him as a psychopath. He has shown not a shred of genuine remorse. It is all about him. He thrives on attention and feels clever when he's playing with the law and grabbing headlines." While Bielefeld was not the original investigating officer in Leigh's kidnap and murder, he gained worldwide attention when he solved the case in just 2 weeks. He said there was little doubt that Moodley would have committed another crime and even killed again if he had not been apprehended. He said that Moodley got a taste of luxury and he did not care about what he had to do to feed it. So I just want to jump back to all of Moodley's appeals. With each appeal, he literally changed the story, and I'm going to tell you all of these versions. So, first version, which was the first time he was in court. Moodley confessed to kidnapping and murdering Leigh Matthews. He said he approached her on the Bond University campus on Friday, July 9th, 2004, and asked her for a lift. He kidnapped her and informed her parents that he had her, and he demanded a ransom. Later that night, he took 50,000 rands from her father, Rob, and then returned to a deserted spot in Aikenhof, where he shot her dead. The next morning, near his home in Lenasia, he made a fire and burnt her clothes in a secluded patch of field. Version 2. In May 2010, the Supreme Court of Appeal dismissed his application for leave to appeal against his sentence. He filed the appeal just before Christmas in 2009 after his application for an appeal in the Johannesburg High Court was refused by Judge Joop Labuschagne. In his application, Moodley added to his case by saying Judge Labuschagne had committed a material irregularity in the proceedings during the conviction in relation to the guilty plea by failing to clear up discrepancies in his confession. In papers, he expanded on the reasons he laid out in his original appeal, telling of an unnamed aunt who on several occasions offered to fund his case and then disappeared. He claimed that while he had planned the kidnapping, the murder had not been premeditated. It was only when he realized at the point of releasing Leigh that he realized she would be able to identify him and that he would be caught. He therefore had no option but to shoot her. And then the latest version. Moodley says a retrial would allow him to expose a web of lies, perjury, and corruption that were perpetrated by investigating officer Piet Bielefeld to ensure that he was locked up for life. Moodley claimed he was forced into a kidnapping by 3 drug dealers named Frank, Jemba, and Ali, who threatened his family if he did not get involved.
I'm sorry, that just makes me laugh. I'm like, so where did this story, all of a sudden there's drug dealers, all of a sudden. No drug dealers mentioned before, but now, in his last version, he's like, by the way, guys, Frank, Jemba, Ali, I could have thought of those names in my sleep.
So, yeah. He said the 3 were after a wealthy French student named Jasper, but when this plan did not materialize, they changed their plan to take someone else. Matthews. He now claims Jemba shot Matthews from behind and then pulled her into the bushes and fired 3 more shots. When it came to all the appeals Moodley made, Bielefeld rubbished Moodley's claims. The claim that he made that he had been coerced into the plot to kidnap Leigh by 3 Nigerian drug lords is a lie. He said, "Don't tell me that armed drug dealers would kill a woman and let Moodley walk away with the proceeds of this crime." He has already given 3 versions of what has happened. This is his 4th pack of lies and no one is buying it.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you.
Donovan Moodley's kidnapping plot destroyed so many lives. The Moodley family was shattered, and they're still coming to terms with the fact that despite their best efforts and love, their son grew up to be a cold-blooded murderer. Stephen Moodley stepped down from his position as minister of the Baptist Church in Alberton. At a press conference, he said that he and his wife do not believe that their son was capable of committing the crime he has confessed to. However, he did express his deepest condolences to the Matthews family. Moodley's ex-fiancée, Yashika Singh, insisted she had no idea to what extreme measures her boyfriend went to buy her engagement ring. Her ring was confiscated by the police's assets forfeiture unit, who visited her at work to get it off of her. After the trial, Yashika left the country and moved all the way to the Czech Republic. Leigh Matthews was just stepping into adulthood. She had a bright future ahead of her, one she would never get a chance to live. The Matthews family has lost a daughter and a sister. She never got to start her career, start a family, live a fulfilled life. Moodley can still see his family, while all of Leigh's loved ones are left with our memories of a young woman who was taken away from them in the cruelest possible way too soon. So dude, before we jump into this discussion, I just want to add that if you want to know more about this case, be sure to check out Piet Bijleveld's biography, Dossier of a Serial Sleuth, by journalist Hanlie Retief. In this biography, Hanlie Retief documents his spectacular record in tracking down some of the country's most serious offenders. He is responsible for putting serial killers like Bongani Mfeka, Lazarus Manzingane, aka the Nazareth Killer, Cedric Marke, the Vemapan Killer, and Sipho Dube, the Mine Dump Killer, behind bars for consecutive life sentences. And there was also a Mnet Crime Uncovered docudrama series that was titled A Family's Nightmare Begins, the Leigh Matthews story, part 1 and 2, that covered the murder. And I'm pretty sure that I saw that, like you can buy that on Amazon Prime. And lastly, her parents opened a center called what did they call her? They called the center the Leigh Matthews Stress and Trauma Center. So, dude, what did you think about this case?
Well, dude, I just feel like, okay, I need to start off by saying this, and this is going to be very rude, but I just need to say it. Firstly, Donovan Moodley radiates limp dick energy. That's all I wanted to say. Secondly, I feel like, it's really unfortunate that those 5 other people, if they were involved, did not get prosecuted. And, I don't feel like justice will ever be fully served unless that happens. I just really, really hope that the prosecutor is right when she said that she thinks that he's going to come forward with the other names, whether his reasons are selfish or not.
Dude, I hope so too, because it literally amazes me that so many people could potentially be involved. I understand one person, because there could be a variety of different factors that could come into play that influences one's decision. But 5, that's insane.
Dude, I could never go along with a plan like that. It's just too wrong. And also, I feel like I'm not even shocked that he appeals so many times. He clearly doesn't understand, what he's done is that bad, or he's just not showing any remorse. He doesn't understand the gravity of the situation. Everything about this case, which is what makes me so sad, it's not about Leigh. He's made it about him. I did this. This is what happened. You feels me?
Dude, I couldn't say that better myself. I 10 million trillion 1,000% agree with you. However, I do want to say that while covering this case, there was so much information and media coverage that I think prior to Unene, which we covered in season 1, this was one of South Africa's biggest cases, because this information was easy to find, and I guess that's why there's a sense of justice, because we're able to hear her story. And I guess that circles back to why we started this podcast. So we can just hear these stories so that we can know the victims' names, to give every victim the chance for their story to get the attention, compassion, and justice that we seem to get with all the big cases like the one we just covered. Also, side note, I would have absolutely loved to meet Piet Bijleveld. Unfortunately, he passed away. I'm not too sure when. I did read it somewhere, but I forgot.
Oh my gosh, dude. I'm such a big fangirl of his, and I feel so stupid because it's a detective, but I am all on Team Pete. So I'm currently reading his book and I absolutely love Pete. And just to hear the type of person he is and the experience and work ethic behind his name honestly just makes him such a iconic person in terms of the South African crime scene.
So, before I carry on with that, I just want to say that if any of you are curious to see a face of who we are fangirling about, definitely go check it out on our social media pages, because we did put a picture of his face up there so that all of you guys can see.
And also, just like a side note, don't expect him to be like, no tea, no shade, Pete. Like some Grey's Anatomy doctor kind of sexy. Like, you know how in like Lucifer the detectives are all sexy? He just looks like a normal South African detective worm.
Yeah.
Like he's not like shirtless and gorgeous, and he's beautiful in his own way. Love him.
Yes, but as we were saying, what makes him an iconic person in the South African crime scene is that people from like the FBI and Scotland Yard would contact him to help solve other cases. So like he truly was absolutely like phenomenal at his job, like being flown like across countries to help like people like solve cases and like catch killers. But may he like rest in peace. He did a great job here on Earth.
So yeah, dude, we're unfortunately out of time, but we hope you enjoyed listening to part 2 of the series of the case of Leigh Matthews.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out our social media for more episodes, case-related content, and other riveting info.
We'd also like to give a massive shout out to Christian Putter for creating our theme song. Be sure to check out more of his work on Instagram at Christian_Putter.
And then we would also just like to thank Anthony Catano for creating our album art. So be sure to follow him at @Catano on Instagram.
And lastly, we'd like to give a huge shout out to VU Media for helping produce this podcast. Be sure to follow them on Facebook and Insta at VU_Media SA.